Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. I'm Suzanne Monroe, founder of the International Association of Wellness Professionals, where I've been teaching people how to live a life of wellness, tap into their passion, and go for their dreams for over 15 years. I believe living well and dreaming big starts with ourselves. This podcast will show you how to create a healthy, holistic life, empower your mindset, follow your dreams, and make a big impact. Let's dive in right now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode. Today's episode is the first in a two-part series on nurse burnout. You know, nurses, they've been through so much in the last year plus, especially taking care of the world and, really risking their lives. And I don't think we can even begin to understand the stressors that they've experienced. I'm sure of that. But today, that's why I'm talking with Heather Brittain about nurse burnout. Heather is a registered nurse turned wellness coach. And in this episode, she's really sharing her behind the scenes story into traditional healthcare, what it was like to be a nurse, how she hit rock bottom, and ultimately why she left nursing to find a new way to help people to live well. And you know what? Heather's story is not just for nurses. I believe anyone listening in to today's episode is going to gain some insight into the lives of those who are supporting us in traditional healthcare. So if you enjoy this episode and you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And of course, share the show with a friend. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started. Welcome to Live Well, Dream Big, and today's episode, Nurse Burnout. Today, I'm talking with Heather Brittain. Heather is an experienced registered nurse, a certified holistic wellness coach. She's also an aspiring author, global meditation teacher, and owner and founder of Bare Root Health. She has a Master of Science in Nursing with a concentration in public and global health nursing. She's won several awards, such as the Nursing Leadership Award, the Nursing Excellence Award, the Peer Recognition Award, and in the process of pursuing her advanced degree, she was proudly noted as the Student Nurse Ambassador and Tutoring Chair Officer. And although she's found all of this success and achievement in her nursing career, Heather also recognized really a large gap in nursing and medical culture, leaving nurses and healthcare professionals burned out and kind of wading the deep depths of compassion fatigue. After coming face to face with her own personal mind and body battles and significant health complications through her professional career as a nurse, Heather chose to take a stand and begin working to doing healing work actually for healers. And so she decided to become a certified holistic wellness coach through the IAWP, and she founded her own wellness company, Bare Root Health, where she's focusing now on empowering nurses around the globe to live and work to thrive rather than to just survive. She's the creator of First Aid Freedom, the anxious nurse's 7-step guide to living more, stressing less, and showing up with confidence and passion, as well as the Mindful Nurse Collective. Welcome, Heather. So excited you're here.
Hi, Suzanne. Awesome to be here. Thanks for that super kind introduction. Like I was talking to you before, it's honestly just an honor to be on this side. So thank you and hello.
Hello. Yeah, I'm really excited you're here and just talking about your journey and kind of sharing your story, because I think especially as we consider, how much stress and burnout nurses and healthcare providers around the world have faced, obviously, even in just the last year plus, it was already something they were experiencing, but it's just amplified. It's just such an important story to be talking about, really, for everybody. So even if you're not a nurse listening in today, I think everyone has an opportunity to gain a new perspective today. So let's start out really by diving in, talking a little bit about your story, your journey to becoming a registered nurse, and then ultimately deciding to becoming a wellness coach. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I always try and preface this with, I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, but that typically ever actually happens. So I'll just dive right in.
Okay.
I grew up in a wonderful home with wonderful parents. I grew up as a competitive swimmer. So the reason I mention this is because when I went to school, I did not care about school. I had no idea what I wanted to do for work or for degrees. I just wanted to be in a pool. Like my goal was to swim really fast. And so that was my entire childhood, was just how good of an athlete can I become, which was beautiful and brought its own beautiful lessons, but also certainly bred my perfectionism and my competitive traits and this people-pleasing tendency and having expectations on myself, whether real or perceived. So when I finished up school in Colorado, I went to Division I swimming out in North Carolina. this was my main focus. This was all I cared about was I just wanted to be a Division 1 swimmer. So I went there. I was a couple years into that and I recognized that I really wanted to help people in an intentional and holistic way. I had no idea at 19 years old what the heck that meant and how I was really meant to help others in that way. And so naturally, when you're in school, and especially when you're an athlete, so you have all these different boundaries on what you can go into, you're given a set of boxes. You have a strength here, you kind of like this. Here's a few boxes that you could fit into. What do you want to mold into? What career do you want to choose? Right there on the spot, 19 years old. I decided that the thing that felt most aligned with me was nursing. I really, really liked helping people, and I really, really liked helping people in the hardest spaces of their life. I liked being able to hold that space. I liked being able to allow others to open up to me in very unique and intimate ways. And so that felt like nursing was it. So I actually, at the time, left swimming behind, which was this huge identity shift in itself. And I replaced that identity with nursing. And so I left my boyfriend at the time, now husband, in North Carolina. Me and my cat fled to the desert in Arizona all alone. No family, no friends, nobody with us, just to go to an accelerated nursing program. Because had I stayed in North Carolina, continued my athletic career, I would have been waiting for nursing school until I was like 30, and that just wasn't my jam. So started right away by moving, and I really, really liked school because, again, it was that identity shift. And so I was replacing it with, ooh, I can be competitive over here. I can put these expectations on myself over here. I can people please over here. And so, like I said, I was really good at school because I was a raging perfectionist. So, I had a 4.0. I was winning all these awards. I was the tutor. I was all of these things. And that felt amazing until it actually reached the clinical component, which in my program was not until about halfway through nursing school. And so you're already a very large chunk of financial investment, as well as me and my cat were just chilling in the desert. So like I made a lot of sacrifices to be here. And halfway through the program, we actually got into the hospital setting, which I didn't have anyone medical in my family. So I didn't have like any kind of inkling as to what this would feel or look like. And I remember going in that first day, and I'm a very big energy person, and everything just felt horrible and dark and doom and gloom. And it just didn't fit me immediately. I was like, this does not align. This isn't how I want to help people. This isn't where I'm meant to be. I felt at the time that I was just passing out a million medications. I would roam into rooms. We had 8 patients on the med surge floor, and I would just roam into rooms. And I'm like, I don't even remember what was wrong with you. It was like your leg, your head, like what's going on? And so I didn't get to know my patients. I was just there to give them their medication. So it felt to me. And so we talk a lot in IWP about being the guide, not the guru. I felt like I was being forced into this guru space with the nursing career and quick fixes and band-aid approaches. And that was just wildly misaligned for me from the very moment I stepped into it. And I remember going home that night and just crying to my cat and saying, Amaya, this is not it. I do not know what to do because it couldn't not be it. In my mind, I had given up so much for this and there was no other option. And so I just needed to feel it out. People told me, you're supposed to be uncomfortable. That's what happens when you're new. And so I said, okay, I'm going to continue with nursing school. I'm doing really, really good. I'm top of my class. Maybe I am meant for this. Maybe these feelings are just nerves. And I continued through nursing school, again, did really well, was totally misaligned the entire time in my critical care rotation and my ER rotation and my women's health, all of those things, nothing quite fit. And I was getting really anxious about, again, what box I was meant to go into. And I graduated again, top of my class. And so when you are really, really good at nursing school, you're also primed to go into these spaces that are high trauma and are just really intense work, like critical care, like ER, like flight nursing. It's really, really taboo to tell your clinical instructors and teachers or your classmates, hey, I'm really good at school, but I actually want to do this that's totally left field. I don't even want to go into the hospital. That's really, really taboo. It's not expected. It's not preferred. You are really primed to go into the hospital route as a real nurse, and then from there shift into a specialty. If you're lucky, you can be brave and shift into your specialty right away. So as I was being primed into this belief system, I really believed at the time that my dream was to work in critical care. So I finished up school and I had 5 critical care job opportunities. One was in the pediatric ICU, which I loved littles, I loved their families, and I thought I wanted to do the most intense, traumatizing work. And so I went into that route. And again, from day one, it was just this is not it. I was so misaligned. And I remember at my 3 months, I was with another nurse that was a brand new grad with me who had just started at the same time. And I said, I don't think I can stay here. And she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, really?" And that's when I realized that I was a little bit different and I was not meant for this space like others were. And that, no, it wasn't entirely just being new feelings. It was real feelings, real signals that I needed to start listening to. I didn't want to explore outside of that though, because all of my clinical leaders, all of my educators, all of my managers, they were saying, "You're new. You need to give it at least 2 years to make a decision." So I did that. I continued on. I continued moving forward. I was also working night shift, which a lot of people rock night shift. I did not rock night shift. I was horrible at night shift. I didn't get any sleep during the day, maybe like 3 daylight hours of sleep. I didn't eat anything. When I did eat, I was like binge eating orange chicken at 10 a.m. after a 16-hour shift. I couldn't move anymore, which was a huge red flag for me. I had no energy. And as a person who movement and exercise was my serenity and my sanity and a really huge piece of my identity, to not be able to move my body in the ways that I wanted was terrifying, actually. So I didn't move, I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. And I numbed myself all the time with social media or just with cravings or whatever the case may be. I just wanted away from everything. So this was kind of what it looked like on the wheel for a good 2 years. And it wasn't until I started manifesting physical symptoms. So I would have recurrent illness. I had 2 emergency surgeries, one to get my appendix out, one to get my gallbladder out. And then it led to severe debilitating pelvic pain. And I couldn't figure it out. It came out of nowhere. I've never had pelvic pain before. It made no kind of sense. And it was to the point where it was really running my life. I was on 15 medications at the time. I was seeing specialist after specialist, getting scan after scan, going down all these routes of autoimmune disease and what could this be? Everything looked picture perfect, but why was this pain so extreme? Why was it so in control of my every move? Nobody really knew. And so I would go to work and I'd be in so much pain that my kiddo, while they're on the vent, as long as they're doing okay, I would sneak into their bathroom and be in fetal position, just trying to feel like I could get through a shift. And so really once it started manifesting physically, I recognized something's gotta shift here. And it's unfortunate that it had to get to that point, but I'm thankful for my body for letting me in on those signals and saying, "Okay, girl, it's time to listen. Like you gotta put it down." And so I remember the turning point was I was actually waiting for surgery. And if the highlight of your life is surgery, then something should shift. But I was to the point where I was like, thank goodness I have this pre-op appointment because maybe it'll give me some relief. And then I can step back into this workload that I have, right? Because I can't give up. I can't quit. I'm not a quitter. I'm Heather. I don't quit. And so I was waiting for this pre-op appointment and I went in and the surgeon said, "Okay, so you want kids in 9 months?" And I wasn't even married at the time and I'm a slowpoke anyways. And I said, "Absolutely not. I do not want kiddos in 9 months." And she said, "Okay, well, then we're not doing surgery for you. So the other option is, a $4,000 out of pocket monthly hormonal injection to suppress the ovarian function entirely. And so which one do you want to do?" And so I was put in this position out of nowhere. Do I want kids in 9 months? Do I want kids never? And oh, by the way, here's some more medications to handle those side effects. And in that moment is when I really chose me. And I said, my body matters, my mind matters, my spirit matters, all that's crushed right now. And adding on with band-aid approaches is just not it. I wasn't a person that often stuck up for myself because I was a people pleaser. And so as I was sitting in the surgery consult, I said, I'm going to do neither of those options. Actually, I want to safely taper off of every medication that I'm on right now and I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to see what happens there. And so they weren't super happy with that idea, but we did safely taper off. And I quit my job the next day. Initially, I did decide, oh, I'm just going to go to labor and delivery. Maybe it'll be a little chiller there, which, by the way, labor and delivery is not chill. If you're looking for chill, that is not the move. But I went to labor and delivery thinking I can help women with breathing techniques. I can help maybe with some mindfulness, right, in the midst of their chaos. And it was little signals of me going in the direction of my purpose, but it still wasn't it. I was there for 2 days and I told the manager, listen, girl, I'm going to waste your time. I can't check another cervix. This is not for me either. And so I went back to PICU and for one day, 1 hour even, and I quit on the spot. And this was the day after that appointment. I had no plan. I had no financial plan. I had no job backup. I wasn't even looking for other jobs. I just knew at the time that I physically, mentally, and emotionally could not stay in the job that I was doing. And so it was actually scarier to stay than it was to leave into the complete unknown. And so I just stopped and I grabbed my journal and I went to Starbucks the next morning and my husband went to work because people still did that. They still physically went to work at that time. And I went to Starbucks and I just wrote, what am I meant for? Who am I as Heather, not as a nurse, not as a swimmer, not as all these identities? Who am I and what do I do now? And people always say, this is so empowering. That is so brave of you. That wasn't the case. It was terrifying. It was extremely dark. It was not a pretty space to sit. And it was not pretty for a good 3 months of me sitting there at Starbucks with my journal, trying to figure out just one small piece of who I was. In this time, I started doing different therapies. So I, of course, did the journal therapy, which I also used that as kind of like an investigation of myself. What am I feeling to cultivate extreme awareness? Why is my body feeling this way? It's never felt this way before. Where did it shift? How did it shift? Where does it feel at different times of the day? What things energize it? What deplete it? So I started down like my own investigation of myself. But I also started adding in meditation practices. I started moving to be kind to my body, and because I love my body, not to compete. So really did a lot of embodiment practices and started working on inner critic and mindset and what are the real barriers here to leaving? Why am I really so afraid of shifting out of where I am? And so I was implementing all of these healing practices at the same, oh, of course, nutrition and all that too, but really implementing all of these at the same time that I was trying to discover my purpose and career. And within 5 months, I had a new job with elementary school nursing, which was great. All the children were alive, and I could go into their classrooms and I could help them with preventative care, and I could really put a focus on their mental and emotional health. And it was a really beautiful space for me. And I had no pain anymore, like not whatsoever. I was not on a single prescription medication, and I was doing great. I have not been on a single prescription medication since, and it's been 3 years now. So I think that in itself was a very large testament to how much strain my work was physically putting on me and just how depleting it was. So then shift a little bit, fast forward, the pandemic happened. So I was working as a school nurse. Children were not in school, and neither was the school nurse, of course. And so I was at home and I was sitting there and I was like, I really like this, but it's still not it. It's still not 100% how I feel I'm meant to help people. I always had this little voice in the back of my head that was like, there's more. There's more, Heather. There's something else. And I started doing my own research on holistic wellness coaching, and of course, found the IWP and started my studies in that little space that kind of lacked other things to do. And it was a great little pocket to fit into. And started my studies there and just obviously adored it and started building my business from there. And now I focus on nurses who were once in the space that I was, not identical. Of course, everyone has very unique journeys. But I never want anyone to feel as alone in that very dark space that I was. And had I had just an ounce more of support and someone to hold that space and say, these feelings are okay. Now, how do we move forward? Had I had that, my journey would have been so much more blissful than it actually was. So again, not cliff notes. Gosh, I really stink at that, but here we are.
But I love it. I just was like, on one level, I was just thinking so much about your story and how unique it is to the path of what you had, what you went on as a nurse and just your personal story. And yet at the same time, I was thinking to myself, wow, your story is so much like so many people in our community, right? Who a totally different career, totally different field, but they go through it. It turns out to be not what they thought. It's just year after year, it gets
Yeah.
harder and harder. And then they have some breakdown of their health. But the thing that's unique is that there's a willingness to say, wait a second, like I can't go on like this anymore. And what does this all mean? It's like this wake up moment. So I
Yeah.
found that to be just so interesting. And yet, you know, what you're going through or what you went through as a nurse, as you now know, as you're helping nurses out there, this is a real story for people. And of course, as I mentioned before, of course, the last year plus or whatever has been even worse. But even before that, nurses were just, this happened to you all before, of course, the pandemic, and you were experiencing this nurse burnout, as we call it. Let's talk a little bit about that specifically. What exactly is nurse burnout in your mind?
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, I think there's a lot of different phases of burnout, and there's different moments to recognize burnout in. So, I think it starts kind of subtly with I'm not really sleeping that well. I'm not really eating that well. I'm kind of turning to more numbing habits. I tend to be on social media every chance I get, right? So, those are some little inklings that burnout is kind of on the horizon. And then we get into a little big of a shift where it's I dread going to work now. Okay, maybe a lot bigger of a shift. I dread going to work now. You know, nurses tell me I cry on my way to work and I cry on my way home from work. I just don't want to go. Yet still, they're picking up overtime and they're jumping in feet first because that's what they feel expected to do. And that's a whole nother story. But to speak to burnout specifically, then we get to this point where it's such sustained mental, physical, and emotional breakdown for a period of time that then it leads to this complete space of lack and loss. So maybe it starts from being extremely anxious all the time you go to work. Once it's reached a full blown burnout, it's kind of a complete numbing in itself. So you may have some physical ailments on top of that. So that doesn't feel quite as numbed. But by lack and loss, I mean, you don't really care about your achievements at work anymore. Or you don't really care who's on the unit, what's going on, what patient you have. You lose your interest in your work. You lose your relationships at work. So you're just very cynical and very critical at work, whether that be of your coworkers or of your patients. You're really not able to or care to see other perspectives in those situations. You're constantly ran down by toxic management. So you lack respect now for your work. So it really leads to this place of just complete loss, if that makes sense, which sometimes it feels like burnout should be on the whole other extreme end of the spectrum where I'm so anxious, I'm so stressed. And yes, that's festering inside. But in the realm of burnout that you're in, it's simply I don't care anymore. I have nothing left to give. I have no more capacity to care another ounce. And that's a really hard space to sit for someone whose career, both personally and professionally, is the foundation is caring for others. So once you lose that, and this does trickle, of course, into your personal life as well. So I remember when I was in the thick of my burnout, obviously I was having extreme pain on top of it, but I remember I would be home and I was never actually home 24/7. I was thinking of my patients and I couldn't turn it off. I had real boundary issues with work and a lot of moral fatigue that I took home. And I remember all of this would be festering inside and I would have a couple of days off and my husband would say, "Hey, we should probably go to the grocery store." And I would just lose it. Like, who are you to think that I can go to the grocery store right now? Right. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, did you have something else going on?" And I had nothing else going on externally, but internally, my oh my, was there so much going on that I had no more capacity to even go get some eggs at the grocery store. Like I had nothing left to give. So that was both personally and professionally once it reached that point.
Well, it's interesting just to hear you describe this story of burnout, how it kind of starts with these little signs, right? You're doing certain things. And I think a lot of us could listen to that and start to relate, but those are good indicators that, hey, something is starting to get off. And as you describe what happened to you and, what happens to nurses and these different stages, it seems like it just keeps building till this point of like, is something small like going to the store to get eggs is just like the end of the world, really. And I think that's something really relatable for people to be like, okay, like, yeah, something's going on here. But people could hear this and say, okay, these are signs that I could start noticing about myself earlier, which I love because like,
Mm.
let's get this conversation going. And I'd love to just hear like a little bit more about your day to day and almost like a day in the life of the nurse, because I think we can talk about like stress and burnout and we can say, okay, I know what that feels like. And nurses can say, yeah, like I am stressed out. But as you describe this, I'm starting to get a picture of like what it really looked like. Is there anything else around that? Like what life was like for you as a nurse or how you eventually hit burnout? It's interesting just to hear that egg story though.
Yeah. So, and I want to preface this with this is uniquely my story. And so everyone sits in different spaces with their nursing career. Some people work really long hours and they work night shift and they love it. It lights them up. They can function really, really well. That's how they take care of their family. It works for them. And for them, they find their own version of health in that. So I want to say that this is uniquely my struggle. And so this may not fit in perfectly with everything, but I think, well, I'll just kind of dive into it. So when I was working in the pediatric ICU, that was when I was at my tip of my despair, tip of my burnout. When I shifted into school nursing, of course, it was a little bit wild with COVID. And so that presented its own challenges and like a little bit of mental burnout that I had to set boundaries there. But it certainly wasn't anything like when I was in the thick of it in hospital nursing, which is what we are primed to do right out of school, which I imagine can somehow relate even to maybe corporate work in a way. It's just kind of what you're primed to do into those industries. And so that's where I was the real nurse. So I went into that and oh my gosh, what did my days look like? Sure. So, well, they look like nights, but I would wake up around 4 p.m. I would start making dinner. My husband would get home at 5. We would eat dinner for about 30 minutes. I would get ready for work for 30 minutes and then I would leave for work around 6. I would clock in at 6:45 and then I would work from 7 p.m. They say 12 hours, but really typically I wouldn't leave the unit until about 9 p.m. So caring for very critical patients for about 14 hours. And then I would get home around 10 a.m. and I would usually fall asleep on my cereal. And I would drive home about 35 miles per hour on the interstate that was like 70. So I was just not mentally well when I was working the shift work. And in between that, I did not eat during my shifts. I would go to work with a nitro cold brew just to kind of like feel a jolt of being alive because I needed some kind of pick me up to get through and, have some compassion and caring for people when I was exhausted. So I ran those 14 hours primarily off of caffeine and not a lot of nutrient intake. I would maybe get a snack at like 3 a.m. if my patient was doing okay. And so I would go home, usually fall asleep on my breakfast around 10 a.m. And then my husband would usually carry me to bed because he's like, all right, girl, we got to like get you somewhere. And so he would get me to bed and then I would sleep maybe until 1 p.m. when I had to go to the bathroom. And then it's so bright during the day and you feel guilt for being asleep during the day, even though you work at night. And technically, this is your sleep time. You feel massive guilt, massive shame around being asleep at 1 p.m. because that's just the culture that we in. It doesn't feel right. And so I would usually be awake around 1 p.m. I was getting my master's in public health nursing at the time, which I now recognize was a complete exit strategy. I just didn't realize it at the time. I just thought that advancing my education and getting a higher degree could make me feel better about where I was and maybe get me a little bit closer to something healthier, although I didn't see it that way at the time. So I would wake up around 1 p.m., do homework, write papers, make dinner at 4 p.m., and go back to work again. And I would always have 3 shifts in a row. I would work on weekends, I would work on holidays. And it was just this rat race. And on my off days, my body was really, really confused. I would go to the grocery store at 1 a.m. because I didn't know what else to do with my time during the night. I was just my whole life revolved around work. And like I said, even when I wasn't at work, I was at work because there was so much toxic upper management and so much negativity on the unit that it would be constant text during the day. There would be help texts all day long. Can you come in? Can you come in? Can you come in? Which also bred a certain level of guilt and shame around if you really couldn't. So it was just this constant rat race of I'm a critical care nurse and that's all I am 24/7, whether I'm home or not. And it was utterly exhausting.
Yeah. I mean, as I hear this day in the life, I think about the stress that people face in any job. Yeah, on some level, I'm relating, thinking, "Oh my gosh," I think back to my corporate days and how I was off crying in the bathroom myself, and and it was just, you felt like you were in a rat race. But I think what's so unique for nurses, especially with the night shift piece, is that there's this without any other stress, like that itself is such a stress to the body, right? And then you add all those other factors to it that you've described, and it seems like such a storm for disaster for the very people that need to be caring for others. And it's such a strange paradox, really. And so that in itself seems like such a big challenge for people, the lifestyle that they're living, yet, they're supposed to be helping people with health and wellness. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that nurses are facing today in terms of their own well-being as they're caring for others? I mean, you've really painted a picture here, but
Yeah, it's really unfortunate, the paradox. And it's funny, it's not funny, but it's funny that you mentioned that because when I went home on a break from nursing school, I told my mom, I have never met a more unhealthy profession than nursing. And it was so odd to everyone. Like, what do you mean? You're the epitome of health. You're the epitome of people trusting in you in health. And yes, nurses care about health. Do they feel they have the time or the energy to care about their own health is a whole nother story. So, especially in this realm of people pleasing, of always being the first line for everyone else's needs, whether that be your patient, the doctor, the interdisciplinary staff, your family, because typically we're also nurses at home and all the neighborhood kids come to us with their scrapes, and everywhere you are, you're just the nurse. And so, where was I going with this? Oh gosh, I lost my train of thought.
well, we were just saying, we're talking about what are the challenges they face in
Oh,
terms of
yes.
their
Oh,
own
yes.
well-being, and it's kind of like, okay, like you're always a nurse, you can't escape from it, and it's just
Yes.
you were telling your mom it's just one of the
Yes.
unhealthiest careers. But I think that was interesting about that, Heather, is like, okay, the rest of the world doesn't really get that. We're like, yeah, you're in healthcare, at least you're semi-healthy, you've got something going for you. But it's so interesting because it seems like it's almost like unspoken in a way too.
Yeah. And so obviously there's these problems that we all know. We all know that long shifts, 12 to 16 hours on your body, night shift work in general has so much research behind it about the adverse effects on your health from it. So while people do tend to make it work and work for them and it feels okay to them, there are still a lot of just general effects, like your cortisol levels are through the roof when you work night shift. And that in itself causes a trickle effect with autoimmune diseases and all of that. So we know that research is out there. Nobody says this is healthy. However, there's not a lot of ways around it. So something that was interesting to me was that when I came into hospital nursing, you immediately start on night shift because you're bottom of the totem pole. Enjoy. And then you work your way up. And for my hospital, they said it'll be about 7 to 10 years before you can get on a half rotating, which is half days, half nights. So it's like 3 weeks of day shift, 3 weeks of night shift. That 50-50 is like the ideal. So it would take about 7 years minimum to reach that point. And then from there, if you stay for maybe another 7, you can work your way up to day shift. Well, then once you're on day shift, say this job isn't really working out for me anymore, I want to go to another hospital. you're back on the totem pole. So you could have 25 years of experience and you're going to be night shift at a brand new hospital for your time again. And so it's just this constant um, battle with shift work. I mean, someone has to take care of them at night. So that's just the way that is, unfortunately. They haven't found a perfect solution for that. But shift work has never been healthy. Eating, there's no such thing as breaks. That just doesn't exist. When you have people's lives in your hands, it's just not possible to always get to eat yourself. But one huge movement as well is just numbing habits as far as alcohol and drugs. There's a really unfortunate move for nurses in that. I can't express how many times people were just like, man, let's go get some drinks. And it was 8 a.m., after our shift. And that was just how we got through. So those habits are just being really instilled. And I think it all starts in nursing school because you wear these badges of honors for, I stayed up all night studying and I went to work and then I came and took my test. And there's these badges of honors of how much you can handle. And that gets translated into your nursing career. How much can I handle? How much overtime can I pick up? I was working with a nurse who was on her 10th shift in a row, 10, 12-hour shifts. And management wasn't saying anything because she was a body to fill that spot. And so, perfect, glad you're here. Instead of, how are you? Are you okay? What are you trying to avoid? What do you need? How can we help you? Those discussions, those lines of trust have really been broken. And so all of these things just really create the perfect storm. And then on top of that, do I enjoy my work is festering underneath.
Sure.
So yeah, it's just a whole complexity of adverse things.
Yeah, I mean, it's phenomenal just to kind of think about that, and then again to think about, okay, these are people that are caring for others at the times that they're, been doing these shifts, and it's scary too to think about,
Yeah.
and then to not have, that on the inside to say, okay, we need to care for our people so that they can care for others. Now,
Yeah.
something I came across recently is this term compassion fatigue, just hearing from nurses in our community who've decided to become wellness coaches. You mentioned it as well. What does compassion fatigue exactly mean?
Yeah, so I like to think of us having like this little emotional bank inside of us. Kind of like, okay, when you go to the bank, you put your, well, everyone mobile banks these days, but like you used to put your check in the little tube and then you'd send the tube up, right? I kind of think of our emotional capacity in that way. It's kind of like filling up this tube inside of us. So what this typically looks like like take my day, for example, I would wake up and immediately start serving others. I would immediately feel like I needed to get dinner ready. I would check my social media. I would check my email. I would see all of the help texts on my phone. So then I would instantly be stressed about, oh my gosh, we have this new trauma admit. I would immediately be on the unit thinking about my patients and what was to come of the shift. So immediately my emotional bank was probably at like half right there, whether it was rarely ever filled with energizing things, usually more with draining things. But I was already at like 50% of my bank right there. Then I went and worked a 12 to 14-hour shift. Well, that puts me at about 99, depending on the night. And then I come home and I have to get things in order here. I need to do my laundry. I need to make sure my cat is fed, probably clean up the vomit that they just did. And then I need to, make sure that my husband, how is he doing? How was my husband's day at work? And again, checking in with everyone else, and then typically scrolling on my phone until I fell asleep. So there, my emotional bank was at probably about 150%. So bubbling over, which was really apparent when these small things like getting eggs led to extreme overwhelm. That was a clear sign that we have no room left in this emotional bank. The issue is that when you're not able to find the space in there or create more space in there, let go of some of that out of that bank, find practices to preserve some of that space, then you wake up for the next shift and you're already at 150% on your emotional bank and you just keep adding and adding and adding. And there's never any room for you. And there's never any room to keep giving or receiving. Both are really blocked in that space. So compassion fatigue is exactly as it sounds. I have no energy to give my compassion or to receive my compassion. There's just this complete block. My bank is totally full. I have nothing.
Wow. And, I'm sure others can kind of hear that too and be like, wow, that might be happening to me in a totally different field or different career. But again, back to nurses though, because this sounds like it's something that's so common because of the pressures that are on nurses today. Yet, what stops nurses from thinking about making a change? Because this sounds like, oh my gosh, who could actually bear this pressure? It sounds so unbearable, but yet nurses continue on. They forge on like you did for many years as well.
Obviously, this desire to help others is key and at forefront, and you don't want to feel like you are leaving others. That's why we constantly pick up overtime. That's why we respond to the help text because, okay, well, I don't want me to not come and that risks someone's actual life. And so that's a really hard tug and pull. Um, but more than that, I would say a scarcity mindset. I remember when I was at 1 year and I went to my annual eval and I was very straightforward with my manager, my educator, and I said, I am not happy here. I am not doing well. I am really struggling with night shift. I'm really struggling with the work that I'm doing. I have a lot of moral fatigue. I have a lot of ruminating thoughts. I'm anxious all the time. I can't turn work off. And this is really affecting my whole life. And I left that meeting with not a single tool to use and not any inkling of things will get better. And I was talking to a seasoned nurse after, and I told her how the meeting kind of went, how I was feeling. I was really transparent. I'm not doing well. And her response to me was, but what else would you do? And that led me to believe that there was no other option. There was nothing else to do, right? This was kind of like cream of the crop work. And if my ego wanted to stay in cream of the crop work and feel needed and feel important and feel like I was making a difference and mattering, then there was nothing else. People would always tell me, you can go to a clinic, you can go to school nursing, you can do all that when you retire. That's things you retire to. That's easy work. You just take some vitals and that's that, which is both untrue and cruel and keeps us completely stuck because it's a total scarcity mindset instead of looking at more abundantly, what else could I do, right? This isn't it. But what am I really good at in this space? I was really, really good at staying up until, well, I had to stay up because I was working. I was really good at my patients staying up until 3 a.m., my mental health patients. And it's really funny. I was looking back the other day and I would bring them journals. And how can we get some of these emotions out of us? How can we help subside a little bit of this anxiety so we don't feel extremely suicidal right now? And it's funny that those steps were kind of coming into play, and those were my strengths in that space. And that's what lit me up, and that's what made me feel purposeful. And now I'm here and I get to actually do that for work. So it was just a little stepping stone. But how can we take those experiences and believe that it's okay if it's not it for life? Because I don't think anything is fully for life. We ebb and we flow and we shift and we change and we grow and we're constantly ever evolving. And so, how can we take our strength in this space that we're in right now and shift it and move it forward into something that continues to serve us? It doesn't have to be, but what else would you do? It can be, but what else would I do? What else can I do? So, fear is also another huge standing point. So, obviously, fear of being completely out of your comfort zone again. Every nursing job is extremely different from one another. So, it's kind of like starting over as a brand new nurse every time you shift into a new space. And of course, leaving the profession altogether comes with a lot of fear and guilt and shame and our judgy Judy, our inner critic in the back, running wild. And so, all of those things are huge contributors to keeping us stuck longer than we need to be.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because on one level, you hear your coworkers say, "Well, what else could you possibly do?" So there is that mindset of, okay, this is the only path, right? And yet you were there was something about you where you were kind of starting to explore, hey, what else could I do? You were allowing yourself that space, even though maybe it was a small amount, but it's continued to grow. I mean, was that kind of the thing that helped you to finally decide to do something different? Or was there kind of like one moment? I mean, I know you described kind of hitting rock bottom. I'm just curious, why did you end up making this powerful shift really? And yet so many nurses are still stuck and are not really able to make that shift if it's something that they want to do.
Yeah, I expressed this in the IWP community as well with my success story. But I remember when school was shut down and I was sitting there and I was feeling overwhelmed. What do I want to do? I was looking out the window and it was a beautiful, clear, starry night. And just this huge, overwhelming feeling of you've got one chance here. You have one life to live, depending on, of course, your religious beliefs. But it was you have one chance here. What do you want to make of this? How do you want to actually live? Our careers are not our identity. They're a beautiful space to contribute our strengths to the world and to find joy in a new way. But our career is not all of us. And I am not just a nurse, I am not just a wellness coach. And so it took that random moment that really came out of nowhere, which I'm sure was building for a long, long time in the making. But it was sitting there and recognizing what wasted time it is to be miserable in my career when I could be something and live in a really special way. I never wanted to be the person that was waiting for retirement. I never wanted to be the person that was waiting for every weekend. Even in my school nurse job, I found myself like waiting for Friday. And I never wanted to be in that space because what a loss Monday through Thursday were. And we're not guaranteed every Friday to make it to the next Friday. And so I just realized in that moment that even at 27 years old, I wanted to live my life, and there was so much more to living than working. And I think once that the power of understanding that came over me, there wasn't anything I wasn't willing to do to chase after it. I just had to do it.
Yeah, so you had almost like this light bulb moment, this sort of moment of clarity, which was amazing. And then you kind of went for it. I mean, was it still scary to go for it? Or was it like, nope, I feel so certain in this because of that moment that you just went for it?
It is still scary every day. Even this morning, I have these moments where I'm like, what am I doing? Right. So, personally that I moved at the same time. I moved to a new state with no family, no friends, and I left traditional nursing altogether to go into my business 100%. So, every single day right now brings fears. And every single day, I have to pull from my own toolkit of what I work on with my clients. So, I guess I should also highlight that in that decision, what's really important is having trust in yourself, is having self acceptance, is having self compassion, is having self awareness. All of these things that took me many, many years to build up moment by moment, step by step, action by action. And it took that many years to actually get to the space where that moment of clarity clicked. But oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought again.
Well, you were
What
just
were we
saying,
on?
it was kind of scary to, I'm just curious
Holy
because
cow.
you're saying, you had that moment of clarity, but it was kind of scary to go to the other
Yeah.
side. And so maybe it brings us to the point of like, what's your new day in the life? Like you wake up every day. I love how you're using your own tools for yourself as you share them with others. Like that's amazing. And now you're this nurse who turned and became a holistic wellness coach. And yeah, it's not all smooth sailing is what I hear you saying, but I'm sensing that there's just so much more peace and joy. Like, how would you describe life today?
I still work on all of the things that I've had to work on. So, all of the things that kept me stuck for a very long time, like the taboo feelings and feeling like I had to be exhausted to be successful, and all of the things that my inner critic brewed up and my perfectionist self brewed up. in wiring what I felt success was, all of those things still come into play. And so now, as I sit here in a really, really joyful space of building my business and helping others intentionally and holistically, I still have to work on those every single day. I still have to practice self forgiveness. I still have to meet myself on the blank page every day. I still have to be very aware of my emotional bank because I'm still giving. It's just in a different way. I have to work on boundaries still. And so all of these things are still coming into play every single day. And every day is still scary. And it's still easy to slip into mistrusting the journey and mistrusting the process and believing I should just go the easy route and do what my degree is for. And so while it is really, really scary almost every single day, and I battle with these things, and I am thankful to have the toolkit that I do and the intentionality and awareness that I do to be able to move forward, it's also incredible when I get to sit here and all I wanted was this window. I worked in a dungeon for so long. All I wanted to see what the weather was like, or to go outside when I wanted, or to eat food when I wanted, to start my day intentionally, to continue my day intentionally, and to end it intentionally was all I ever wanted for my life. And to have this freedom now is more than I could ever ask for, but it does come with a lot of fear in itself.
Yeah, and it is such a journey because I think we get to a point in our life where something kind of happens. We have this rock bottom where we blow up and we're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make a change. But whatever things were coming up for us then, like you talk about your inner critic or whatever our old patterns were, people pleasing, whatever, they don't just magically disappear because we take this next step forward, right? They what we start showing to the universe is like, hey, I want to change and I'm starting to work with that change, but they don't necessarily go away, right? Like I even say for myself, like decade plus later, like the same things that were there 15 years ago when I first started on my journey are still there, but they change and they shift and they evolved. And you get better at working through those fears. They don't necessarily disappear, right? And so I think that's just so important and really healing for everybody to hear. I want to just spend a little bit of time especially for the nurses that are listening or others who are listening who are just experiencing burnout, or even coaches who are on this path who are, they probably can relate to that term compassion fatigue as well, because as your practice grows and you're giving and maybe you have family or other people you're supporting, like that's something that others can be experiencing as well. So give us a little insight into some of the tips that, you think can help prioritize our own health and well-being, especially as people who are caregivers, nurses, those who might be experiencing some sort of compassion fatigue. What are your thoughts, Heather?
Yeah, I will say it was so hard to narrow down the tips because I just have so much that I would be able to give you depending on the space that you're in. So I came up with my top 3 tips that I have done every day since I decided to choose me. And so these things I fit into the space when I was at my rock bottom, when I was shifting out of rock bottom, and even today as I feel really liberated in where I am. So these are the 3 tips that I use every day that maybe can find some joy in your life. So the first one is I called it, this is to really preserve the emotional bank. So like we talked about, it's on overflow oftentimes when we're in these places of unfulfillment, of burnout, of overwork. So, how can we preserve our emotional bank a little bit more? How can we let go of what's in our bank a little bit more? So, I call this the daily download because we're so used to, no matter what profession we work in, just as American culture, we're really good at checking in with the rest of the world and taking care of the rest of the world before we ever check in with ourselves. So, the very first thing is a daily check in, a daily download. So, what I do is I set my alarm 10 minutes earlier than I want to wake up. Or if you wake up to the sunlight, beautiful, just hang out in bed for a little bit. And I put one hand over my heart and the other hand over my belly. And I just feel the way my heart beats. I feel the way my breath rises. I remind myself that I'm a whole human being. I am not just one component of myself today. I'm not just my career. I'm not just the things I have on my agenda today. I'm a whole human being. My heartbeat and my breath rise reminds me of this. And then I ask myself, what do I need today? What do I need to allow some of that space in that bank to be only for me? And it's interesting when I ask myself this question because a different answer arises every single day. Some days it's like, I got to stop this. I just need a drink of water because I'm so thirsty, right? Like I just need to drink more today. Or maybe I need to feed myself a little bit more. I'm noticing some pain or some headache. Or maybe I need to connect with someone today. Maybe I'm feeling a little bit lonely, a little bit sad. Maybe I need a new form of connection. Should I call my mom? Should I go to coffee with a friend? Whatever the case may be, something different pops up every single day. So this is cultivating some awareness. It's also prioritizing yourself. So after I do my check-in, I take a few more moments to just let it be. And then I do not check my phone again. I go get ready for the day. I determine whatever space what I decided what I need, where can I fit this in today? Maybe it's right off the bat. That's usually ideal, but it might not be. It might be like, hey, at 6 p.m., I'm going to do this, and this is where that fits into my day. Perfect. But create an intention for it, create a space for it, block out a time for this need to come in. So after I do that, then I don't check anything at all. I get on with my day. I make my breakfast. I nourish myself. I, take a shower to wash off whatever was left over from the evening to start fresh. And the reason I never check anything else again, I don't check in with anyone else during this time, is because I'm preserving that space in my emotional bank so that I can show up in my day. I can show up for my clients or my patients or whatever it may be, because I have that space now. And some of it has already been designated towards me, but the rest of it is preserved for my day. It hasn't been taken down with low vibe areas of trauma bonding like social media or national news or my email or all of these places of mental clutter that really are leading to constant overwhelm immediately right off the bat, even if it's filled with really exciting things. It's just not, I need that mental space and that emotional space to really show up authentically. So the daily check-in, the daily download, and then getting ready all alone, like just getting ready when I'm driving somewhere, just driving, when I'm eating breakfast, just eating breakfast. So single tasking as much as possible in the morning, which is crazy that it's so hard, but it can be really, really difficult not to get pulled in a million directions, but trying to keep that space preserved as much as possible. Then I go through my day and I do my thing and I add in any practices that I may need that may be in my toolkit, but I just show up and I live and I appreciate all that comes in my day. And then at the end of the day and at the end of my work, I meet my journal and I ask, what do I need to forgive myself for today? This is kind of a closing way to close out the workday. But I also find that things come up from a lot of different spaces. I might have had a really wonderful day, and I don't feel like I need to forgive myself for that much today. But hey, when I was 4, this happened, right? And these things just kind of brew up that you never really expected. And so that we're hanging on to, we're clinging on to, that we're allowing to fester and brew inside of us and really taking up a lot of space in that emotional bank. So meeting those on the page and recognizing, what didn't feel so comfy today? What am I kind of being really hard on myself for? What is going to end up ruminating at 2 a.m. when I could be resting? And can we maybe ruminate over it now and find a way to shift forward from that intentionally? So those are the 3 practices I do: a daily check-in, and then I avoid everyone for the first, half hour of my day, and then self-forgiveness at the end of every day to kind of close out.
I love it. And it's just like this awareness, right? Because we can be running through the cycles in our day, no matter what we're doing, even if we're following our passion in life, doing something we love, like we can get on that hamster wheel. And here you're carving out these end caps to really check in. And what I hear from you is like, it just keeps bringing more and more awareness. Who knows what's going to come up? But the point is you're showing up for you. I love it. I want to ask you one more question, then we're going to go to our talk back time. But one of the things I've heard you talk about is this human under the scrubs. What do you mean by that? And talk a little bit about that, because I know you're doing so much now to help nurses today as a wellness coach. Just give us a quick insight into that.
Yeah, so every Nurses Week, you'll see this fancy little meme running around that says, nursing is not what I do, it's who I am. I hate this phrase so much because I don't believe that nursing is all we are. And that's very clear in the work that I do and how I express my work. But like I mentioned, it's not our identity. And so we often think that our scrubs, our stethoscope, our title, the work that we do, that is what makes us human. That is what makes us us. That's what made Heather at one point. When you tie your identity so closely to your career, the fallout of no longer being aligned to that career is also a fallout in your personal identity. And so, if we can learn to separate those two and find joy in the two separate spaces and recognize that we are a whole human being under our scrubs or under whatever workwear you wear, we have to prioritize that person first because that's the one that matters here. And so, whatever you put on and whatever you go do, wonderful. I hope it brings you joy. I hope it lights you up. I hope you find purpose and passion in that. But if you don't, you're still a whole human being and you can still prioritize yourself and you can still find purposes outside of those scrubs that you're putting on. So it's really just this shift in our culture that we aren't what we do. We are people and we get to do something on top of that with ourselves.
It reminds me of an old Wayne Dyer quote, we're human beings, not human doings, right? But we we can't help it. It's like everything we do in our day, we identify with all those things. But I love how you talk about this. And I know you're supporting so many nurses today. And I've had the pleasure of getting to know Heather more personally because not only is she a certified holistic wellness coach with us, but she's also studying now to become a certified master coach and certified virtual coach. So I've just gotten to learn more about how you're helping nurses, specifically about your coaching programs. And I've enjoyed seeing what Heather's up to on social media. So if you want to follow Heather out there, she's on Instagram at coach.heatherbrittain. Her website is bareroot.health.com. We'll post those links in the show notes below as well. This has been such a fun conversation, Heather.
Yes, I've enjoyed it. I wish that I maybe should have ate lunch before since the brain's kind of going out sometimes.
Well, we're going to give you a break from chatting now because we're going to go to our talk back time now. Open up to everyone who's a live listener today. And I'd be curious from anybody out there who's kind of in the caregiving, helping healing professions, or as coaches, as you think about helping others, like this idea of compassion fatigue, I think is such an interesting topic for coaches as well, not just nurses, because you go into this, you're here to help people, right? But all of a sudden you're so busy, you're taking on new clients, but you're also, of course, working on your business, but yet you have this whole other life where maybe you're already caring for people in many ways. Oftentimes those who are drawn to coaching are those who are on the path of sharing and giving and caring with others too. So I think it's interesting, and I'm curious if anyone out there is experiencing something similar or has any thoughts about that. This is a good time to just check in.
Hi, Heather. Hi, Suzanne. Hi, everybody. So I just wanted to thank you as an RN who I just retired from a school nursing position. I think I might have talked to you once on Thrive. And I've been a nurse for almost 40 years. And so I could really resonate with everything you said, everything pretty much, except that you figured it out a lot younger. And just, yes, we are all on different paths. And so my path looked a lot different in some ways, but extremely the same in other ways. So I just wanted to thank you for the work that you're doing. And I know it's scary. And even at my age, it's scary to leave your job as a nurse. And I had other nursing jobs. I did work nights. I worked in mental health field, and I saw horrible, horrible things along the way for myself and others. That could have really gone a lot better. I think one of the issues since I started in the 80s was, and it was starting to change, but because it's a field, a career field, mostly with women, that had its own issues, that we tend to give a lot and not take care of ourselves. So, but I really, really want to thank you for doing that for nurses. I wish that there had been somebody like you that I could have talked to along the way, because I had the same questions, like, who am I? And I want to help people, but this isn't exactly it. But it would have been great to have somebody like you. So thank you so much for the work that you're doing and putting out there for all the nurses and other healthcare workers that really need the help to figure it out. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being so vulnerable in the space that you're in and saying, yeah, it is scary. And it's really interesting because when I was in the field, I thought everyone was doing great. I thought I was the one that was suffering and that nobody else was having these feelings. Everyone else was like rock star critical care nurses and they were killing night shift and they were, they were showing up and they had their drama and their problems, but they loved their work. And I was like, why can't I just be like everyone else? And then when I decided to move forward and open these doors, which I will say was a complexity in itself, I was very resistant and hesitant to working with nurses because I kind of wanted to just throw it all over my shoulder and not look back. But then I recognized that when I opened those doors and I started saying, I'm really suffering and I'm really unhappy and this isn't it for me, my inbox is flooded with nurses that I never expected that were saying, thank you so much for saying it. My goodness, I've been so tired of pretending that I love my job. And my move is not to try and get nurses to leave by any means. I don't focus on nurse retention. I don't focus on nurse leaving. I just focus on helping the human under the scrubs. But it was interesting how many people came to me who I would have never known they were struggling had I not opened those doors and opened those avenues and held that space for them to say, dang, me too. And that is where the support is from. And so when I was in that space and I would go to people and I'd say, man, I'm suffering. And people would say, well, you're new, you're supposed to, or, it's hard work. Yeah, you'll get used to it. That was not support. That was not the help that I needed. That was not the space that I needed held. So thank you for stepping into this space as well and being that support system, because I can confidently say that it would have made a massive difference in my transition and anyone's, whether they're a year in, 20 years in, 40 years in, whatever it may be. People are struggling. It's just really taboo to talk about it.
I always say nurses were like the original health and wellness coaches. Like before there was anything to do with coaching, before there was health and wellness coaching, like that to me is like you guys were the original health and wellness coaches. So now it's just like an evolution, right? And you say, okay, I'm doing this in kind of a new way. And I just think it's so amazing to hear from other nurses out there too, who have made this transition and are still there to just be guides in the wellness movement. It's really amazing. So fun to hear from Lise, another nurse out there. And others are sharing in the chat. They love the morning routine that you do and kind of your whole process, Heather. And this was an inspirational conversation. I agree. And Heidi says she loves single tasking. And I've got to say, I also really liked that phrase, just to keep in mind, right? Because we can catch ourselves. Am I single tasking or am I multitasking today? I don't know. Really, really good. I loved it. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining us. This has been such a powerful conversation, really. Thank you, Heather, for joining us on Live Well, Dream Big. It was fun hearing about your story and just where you are today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and hang out with you guys today.
And thanks to everybody for listening in. I look forward to our next conversation soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of Live Well, Dream Big. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. And I want to invite you to take your next step toward living well and dreaming big by downloading the Live Well, Dream Big lifestyle book. It's the ultimate guide to becoming your best self and living life on your own terms. You can grab your complimentary copy by going to the link in the show notes or heading directly to iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide. That's iawpwellnesscoach.com/guide.